ECSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sportsbooks and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app. Hey sports fans, are you ready for an exhilarating gaming experience? Introducing VIPClub.lv, your ultimate online sportsbook and casino. VIPClub.lv offers a vast selection of sports, from football and basketball to tennis and baseball. Bet on your favorite teams and enjoy the thrill of the game. But that's not all. Our state-of-the-art online casino offers a dazzling array of games, including slots, blackjack, roulette, and live dealer tables. Win big with their fantastic promotions, rewards, and exclusive offers. Join VIPClub.lv today and get a generous 100% match welcome bonus to start your winning streak. Make sure to use code ECSI at sign-up. Bet it, win it, and cash it at VIPClub.lv. Visit VIPClub.lv now and play responsibly. VIPClub.lv, your sportsbook and casino extravaganza. Must be 21 or older to play. Please gamble responsibly. Visit gambleware.org for help.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your closing bell for Friday, January 5th, 2024, with, of course, good friend and colleague, there we go. We're back. As we always end Fridays with Ron live from LA, talking NCAAF and NFL. Shout out to our proud sponsor and new partnership, WagerWire. If you have not downloaded the app, please jump on over to Google Play, download it. It's free. Get yourself accustomed to the app, the sports books, the free offers from the sports books themselves. If you're looking for a little quick flash cash, send an email to affiliate@wagerwire.com. Tell them JD from ECSI sent you. Travis, Zach, the rest of that team, staff, and family and community on Twitter, our amazing group. And a shout out to VIP Club as well. New sponsor as well for 2024. Head on over to VIPclub.com. Use ECSI at the sign up. And again, tell them JD sent you. So let's bring in the true star of this show. Interested to see his take on the semifinals. Interested to see his take on who he thinks might win on Monday and why. And of course, week 18, where expect the unexpected. Who's playing, who's not playing, who's playing for playoffs. That's right. Buffalo might have to play to get in, or if they're lucky, could actually win and be the number 2 seed, as crazy as that sounds. So without further ado, let's bring him in, Mr. Ron himself.
Happy New Year, Jeff. Hope all is well. 2024. It's amazing. Year flies by.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Yes, 2024 is officially here. We're 5 days in. I remember talking to you late August and September about who you thought would be in the Final Four. And it's kind of funny, Ron, because this doesn't happen often. And I can reflect late August on Sports Map Radio with Anthony Pepe. And he does a Beantown breakdown, and it's 5 questions. And one of the questions was NCAA Final Four and who cracks the Final Four unexpectedly. And my team was Washington. My team was Washington to win the Pac-12. My team was Washington to shock the world to get to the Final Four. And in October 14th, we added an Alabama plus 2,000 ticket from DraftKings. So now I'm sitting in the catbird seat. I'm like, and honestly thought the winner of Michigan, Alabama would probably obviously be the favorite in the championship game and most likely win the game. We jumped on Michigan plus 200. So that's the last ticket holding right now. So thoughts on the semifinal games, what you saw, what you thought going in, and the final results.
Well, first of all, I know I have proof that you were on Washington pretty much all season long. So congratulations on that one. I thought it would be. I thought the matchups favored Washington against Oregon, but I had Oregon as my preseason conference champ. So, when it came time to play the games, I had the right side both times. So that worked out. Last week, I thought Michigan came out a little scared. I was surprised that Michigan special teams let them down. I was a little surprised that they seemed to. I know when the announcement was that Alabama was going to play them, they said, oh, that's probably not the team we want to face with 35 days or 28 days of preparation. And then I thought they reset themselves in the middle of the third quarter, realized that this Alabama team wasn't really, the names on the jerseys, that jersey really matters. But Michigan had to feel at some point they were just flat out the better team, but they needed some really good I would say acrobatic catches to get it to overtime and an Alabama mistake on fourth down in overtime to win that game. Sometimes that's the hardest thing is winning that first game. I thought in general, Alabama slightly outplayed them. I think Michigan's offense was true to form from the regular season. Blake Corum, off his injury, did not run as well in 2023. Maybe the offensive line wasn't quite as good in 2023. Still very, very good. Edwards, the other running back who averaged over 7 yards a carry in 2022, averaged, believe it or not, just 3.5 yards per carry this year and only ran 4 for 11 in this particular game. So they relied on McCarthy and an offense that didn't pass much, but passed effectively when they did pass. And that defense is, especially the front four, even though Alabama got some first downs on them, is still pretty formidable. That would be my take on that game. As far as Washington's concerned, their offensive line doesn't get enough credit. I think in a lot of circles, the people who know give them a lot of credit. But Michael Penix, he tends to throw between 35 and 40 passes a game. And the team got sacked, I believe it is now 11 times, still 11 times in 14 games. So he's getting sacked less than once per game. And he's trying to drop back to throw 35 to 40 times per game. That's a great offensive line. Their lead wide receiver is outstanding. I don't know how he's going to be stopped in this particular game. Toe-to-toe with Texas. My thoughts going in was in the game was that Texas was a slightly better team, that they would have some running success, and they certainly did have running success. If you take it, piece by piece, they ran over 5 yards a carry, almost 6 yards per carry in terms of how Texas was able to run in that particular game. But I credit Washington with when Penix is in rhythm, that's quite an offense.
So many ways to go. I probably should have shortened my first question. I apologize. Going back to the Texas game, the Alabama and Michigan game, I'm so glad you said it the way you did in this regards, because for most people outside looking in, you are spot on. This was a good Alabama team. Grateful to be in the Final Four after the Week 4 loss to Texas, after Sheeting winning, beating Ole Miss, beating LSU. Very fortunate 4th and 31, obviously, to beat Auburn, then to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. and then obviously to get selected, and versus a Michigan team full of adversity. No Harbaugh the first 3 games, no Harbaugh the last 3 games. Yet I think the team of destiny. And as I watched the game early, I said to myself, this could be a rout in Michigan's favor, because I thought they were just going to keep leaning on them and then just wear them down in the second half. And then in comes Alabama in the second half. And I think for most of the third quarter, it was a different team. It was Alabama leaning on Michigan. And it was like, OMG here. Not that we have a game here, but Michigan's in trouble.
Yeah. I believe Alabama's quarterback was sacked 5 times in the first half, but only once in the second. So we saw some adjustments in that regard. And Michigan didn't want to get out of its pedigree, or however you want to call it. They are a smash mouth football team. If all is going well, McCarthy is not going to throw the ball that many times. Now, I did expect him to throw the ball over 26 and a half times last week. And he barely got there. So I think that if Michigan throws the ball 27 times this week, it's probably not a good idea for them, because the way you want to approach this particular game is to have Penix on the sidelines. You do not want to have him get in rhythm. You don't want him to complete 75% of his passes, because when he gets in rhythm, we've seen it in past Ohio State, Michigan games when they become shootouts when you wouldn't expect them to be shootouts. Well, Washington's team is geared for shootouts. So the more you put Penix on the field, the more you risk that you're going to have a high scoring game.
Yeah, and I'm going to circle back to that, because I was listening to Joel Klatt this week, and he brought up the boa constrictor, and I'm going to add a little NFL to that as well when we break down that game for you. Getting to the second game, Washington, Texas. I talked about before the game started, very simply in our alert. If Texas puts pressure on Penix Jr., they're going to win the game. If they do not put pressure on Penix Jr., allow him to get into rhythm, then whoever has the ball last most likely will win the game. And they were gifted 21-21 at halftime, but the third quarter, they had a 3-and-out and a turnover. They had 5 plays in the third quarter. Yeah. And if you go back to the fumble and the turnover, this game might have been a blowout on the Washington side. And so it was almost like Sark and the OC in the fourth quarter were almost like in panic zone and like, I don't want to use the word desperate, but they were out of sync. Does that sound correct, Ron?
Yeah. Sark has a great offensive history. He's kind of one of those masterminds offensively, but has he put together a complete program? I mean, this was a loaded Texas team. Sark is a very good coach, but to get over the hump and to get all the way to the title game, Jim Harbaugh, same thing. This was his third try and he got there. I think Texas recruits so well that they're going to be in the mix year after year after year. But he just couldn't quite get over the hump. And I think Washington was the deserved winner. If not for an unfortunate injury at the end of the game, there would have been even less time on the clock. Washington had the game pretty much won, and then they had to survive the crazy end of that game. They could have been beaten, even though that they outplayed Texas for most of that game.
And the drive before the onside kick, again, 1st and goal from the 5. I thought the 3 play calls were hideous. They settled for the field goal. So now they're down 6. They do the onside kick. And again, the handoff, timeout, handoff, timeout, handoff, timeout. And then the injury stopped the clock, the delay of game. And then the running into the guy catching the ball was the additional 15 yards. Yeah. But the bottom line, 1st down from the 12 with 15 seconds. And then Sark, first play, throws a little dump off to the running back. If you ever caught that in play, game was over.
Yeah. Yeah. As I study the draft, and this will be the 44th time I study the draft, I hope Quinn Ewers stays in college. he floats a very nice ball that gets right into the receiver's hands. I mean, it's the beauty to watch. But the key word is float. I don't think he has shown me anything that he could throw a fastball in tight windows. I'm worried about that he doesn't have the complete game for the NFL. And I think there's things he needs to work on. And that showed up one or two times in the semifinal.
And again, you're spot on, because even the announcer, when they were on the 12 and knew they had 4 plays, was even designing a slant and, throw the ball in the end zone into the middle there. And you were spot on. Not once did they try it. They did a couple fades to Mitchell in the corner. So hats off there. The championship game, I saw some spots open up Michigan at 3.5, quickly 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5. I'm seeing it now come down to, I think, let me see here. I'll go to Circa right now. Circa has it at a flat 4.56. Joel Klatt used the boa constrictor. I use this thought process. How do you slow down Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady? You keep them on the sidelines. And of course, Michigan doesn't want to get into this shootout. First one to 30 or 35 wins this game. A steady dose of Blake Corum, a steady dose of keep away, a few 3 and outs. As Joel said, is you want to keep Washington into that 9 or 10 possessions throughout the whole game. And if you get a few of those 3 and outs, start that ground control, start that keep away. And you brought up the fact that Michigan sacked Milroe 5 times in the first half and only once in the second. So your thoughts leading up to the kickoff, do you agree with the thought process? And what is your actual assessment if you had Biff's almanac on who is the winner on Monday?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because Michigan wins if they run for 200 yards. If McCarthy throws 27 passes, I don't think they win this game. I think they know it, and I think Washington knows it. Washington's not great against the run. Texas gashed them far more than they should have. I knew Texas would run effectively. I just didn't think they would run even that effectively. The problem for Texas is they couldn't stop Penix. And the bottom line for Michigan is they want to bully Washington around. The bottom line for Washington is you're not going to penetrate our offensive line. We know you had 6 sacks, but again, Washington only allowed 11 in 14 games this year. If Penix is giving time to throw, and it's not just their lead receiver, who I don't want to mispronounce his name, but there's 3 other guys on the roster that are really good. Polk, and I think it's McMillan, and there's somebody else as well, the tight end. Both teams, I love tight end play in college title games and championship games and so on. We saw a great tight end play from Texas, and we have an unsung hero with Washington as a tight end as well. If that offensive line holds up in pass coverage, then Washington's going to have a pretty good game. There's only one game that Penix actually had trouble this year, and it was not that it was a surprise that he was held down, but he was held under 50% when they played Oregon State at Oregon State, 13 of 28. If he has that kind of game, they're not going to win this game. They're not going to come close in this particular game. I have Penix throwing the ball 40 times in this game. And if he's only sacked once, that's the pathway that Washington could have.
And I think it's an amazing matchup. Thoughts from our colleagues. This is a potential mic drop for Harbaugh. We assume there's sanctions coming. We are hearing rumblings. The Chargers are desperately looking into his services. It's going to be a fabulous, fabulous game either which way. Obviously, super stoked and excited and can't wait for it. And I'll close with this. It was kind of comical, Ron. Here's 18 weeks that you and I have done our Friday closing bell shows, and watching social media and listening even to the broadcaster, how Penix was dropping dimes, and then the social media aspect. Oh my God. I mean, Penix was the next coming to Steve Young or someone that they had never, not many people watched the Pac-12. This kid's been doing this all year, and now he's up to possibly the third quarterback off the board, and now in front of Jaden Daniels.
Well, I'll go in sad mode again. Michael Penix did nothing in Indiana. Bo Nix did nothing at Auburn, an SEC school. They come to the Pac-12 network where nobody sees their games. And all of a sudden, Bo Nix is fantastic. Michael Penix is fantastic. And now the Pac-12 disappears. But it just shows that what they've done with Washington and what they've done with Oregon, that offensive coordinators, passing game coordinators, quarterback coaches matter. And maybe it's a red flag for teams like schools like Auburn and Indiana. Hey, you let these guys slip right through the cracks. You better fix your offense.
NFL Week 18, the Baltimore Ravens laid a smackdown on the Dolphins, earned the number 1 seed in the AFC. In the NFC, hats off to the 49ers as they are the number 1 seed in the NFC. A lot of positions up for grabs, potential 2 seeds, 3 seeds, yada, yada, yada. Go back to last week, pre-flop, and what you saw. Thoughts on week 17 of the NFL, Ron?
Okay, so week 17, I'm trying to think how many surprises. I think there was one surprise for me. I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. I mean, Cleveland, the 2 teams that I tried to steer away from, Cleveland a little bit, and certainly Indianapolis. I just haven't had a handle on Indianapolis all year. So Atlanta beating them 29-10 was a little bit of a surprise to me there. Not a surprise that Pittsburgh took care of Cincinnati. The Baltimore San Francisco game was fascinating to me. I expected to see a very interesting game between, to me, the top 2 teams, certainly in the, am I going back? I'm going back 1 week too far there. So I don't have last week's results in front of me.
No, you were fine. Baltimore, Miami, Baltimore laid the wood there on that game, setting up obviously the game of the week that we will eventually get to. Were you surprised? I talked about this. My dog of the day, or one of them, was the Saints. In comes Tampa, winners of a couple games of a row, a chance to win the division, favored over the Saints. Saints defense dominated, offensively did what they had to do. Surprised on the ineffectiveness of the Bucs, or more surprised on how the Saints played?
Not surprised at all. That was my top play of the week. So I was really, really high on the Saints. They had a couple of matchup indicators that were really effective to me. I think I mentioned earlier today, Alvin Kamara is a nice back, but he's not a world beater. And so every time you pass the ball to Alvin Kamara, it's a break for the defense because he's not going anywhere. He started the year with 11 catches for 33 yards in one game. That's 3 yards a reception. That's unheard of. And he's ended the year pretty much the same way. So when he went down, it didn't bother me in that particular game. I just thought there was a good matchup there. Tampa Bay they kind of like to establish the run with White, and it just didn't look like a good matchup for them.
New England in a nor'easter maybe on Sunday, or some kind of precipitation. Host the Jets, 2-point favorites. I will tell you that there is a bug going around in the Patriots locker room as we speak. Bill in his press conference today did it remotely, didn't sound too good himself. Is the end coming? Is this his last game? It has been a strange year for sure for the Patriots, who are sitting right now with Washington in that 2-3 spot for the draft. Thoughts on the Patriots moving forward? Are you in the camp that this is Bill's last game, or do you think that maybe bringing in a new GM, a few new coaches, and him just worried about coaching might be an avenue that Bob goes.
Yeah, it depends on how stubborn Belichick is, because he's had such control over all these years, and maybe he's earned it. But Bill, the GM, has been well below average throughout his tenure. I mean, it's documented; everybody knows that, and so on. 6-7 weeks ago, I would have said, well, Bill's staying because he didn't draft 13 people in the 2023 draft to just leave. He wanted to build this thing back up again. But now I think there's fatigue on all sides of the coin, especially if they lose at home to the Jets, who they've beaten at home, I think, 14 straight times. It's just so strange to see Bill Belichick, who specializes in the special teams and turnovers and whatever, be at the bottom of the barrel in turnover margin this year. I mean, it's negative double digits. And his kicker can't kick a field goal. I know he had the 56-yard field goal win or whatever it was a week ago, but he also missed one in that game, and he missed two, last week. His percentage is among the lowest in the league. I mean, special teams play has been horrible for them, and they've been in a lot of games, but it's dinosaur offense. I think this is a parting of the way now, and there's a lot of work to do to build this roster back up, because it's not a fast roster. They lack speed.
Week 18, there's 2 games. Is it tomorrow? Actually, you know what? I should have went to this. I don't mean to be jumping back and forth. In the FCS championship game, Montana, South Dakota State, did you have any leans or any information on that game?
I usually simulate these games, and I have a near perfect record. I lost one this year. I did not simulate this game. It would have required a lot of work because I have the data from before these teams were in the playoffs. But I would have to manually enter all this playoff data that they had, which meant 2 extra games for each team. And I just went in another direction. So nothing on this game at all for me.
Okay. Saturday, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Baltimore, again, has already wrapped up the 1 seed. Pittsburgh -3. And then Houston, Indianapolis, kind of interesting here, where initially Indianapolis was a 1.5 point favorite. Now Houston a 1 point favorite. And of course, our good friend Russell Saylor listening. Hi, wondering your thoughts on the Houston Indianapolis game, especially.
Well, that's a fascinating game to me. Let me start by saying week 1, week 5, and week 18 are the most fascinating weeks to me. And we've talked about it. Week 1, you have all summer, your power ratings are in. I kind of know which teams are undervalued and overvalued. Week 1, that's week 1. Week 5, we've had the quarterly report. There's some serious situations that develop week 5 that make it a wonderful week, like it was again this week. And week 18 is like no other. So in week 4, I had 1 play. In week 6, I had 1 play. This week, I'm likely to have between 30 and 35 plays.
Wow.
Who am I? I don't even know the person I am. But we're talking about quarter plays, halftime plays, over-under plays, stuff like that. I'm fascinated by the Houston Indy, kind of almost win and you're in, lose and you're out kind of situation. In those, I'm curious as to how the first quarter plays out, how the second quarter plays out. I see a wild game developing. I understand why Houston is the favorite. Anybody who does power ratings would make Houston the favorite over Indianapolis. I love the way DeMeco Ryans handles his team, what he's done this year, how he forces teams to have to pass to beat them. It's a big step for the kids in Houston. And, it's a lot of new faces. Every year they've turned the roster over because every year they've had a new coach. I don't have a handle on who's going to win the game, but I'm fascinated by the game.
Under over a 47, now 47.5. Indy has played in a lot of high-scoring games on paper, in the dome, on a fast track. Doesn't it seem like there should be a good flow here and a lot of points back and forth?
I think so. I think the over is in play. I think there's a possibility that both teams understand the significance of the moment, and maybe they start slow or they feel each other out at the beginning. That's why for one of the few weeks of the year, maybe the only week of the year that I'm sitting and doing some in-game betting, there's a possibility that if it's 0-0 after 5 minutes, you get an over-under algorithm that comes out at 44.5 and 45, and then you go to the over at that point. Because at some point, these teams are going to open it up.
Sunday, a bunch of meaningless games. And of course, there's a bunch of games, as you said, winner take all here. Dallas, Washington, Dallas 13-point favorites, win an NFC East champs. I think 4 or 5 weeks ago, we would have laughed at that statement. Thoughts on Dallas, the emergence of seat, not the emergence, but the flag in the star of CD Lamb. What a performance last week against the Lions, and just a bona fide, top 3, top 4 wide receiver right now in the game.
Yeah, Dallas is a fairly complete team. I know they've had some trouble. Well, first of all, Mike McCarthy almost gave that game away last week with his end game management. There should have been no time left on the clock for Detroit to have a chance in that game. So I've said it all year long. Mike McCarthy has to get out of the way of this team because Philadelphia just didn't develop this year. Dallas has a golden opportunity to have that number 2 seed. My take on this game is Washington, Carolina, the New York Giants, teams like that, who Washington, and even Tennessee, teams that are pretty much done for the year. Watch what they do in the first 5 to 7 minutes of the game. If Washington scores first, they're involved. They're engaged in the game. If Dallas takes a quick 7-0 lead and then gets the ball back real quick, maybe a Sam Howell turnover, this game could get very, very ugly fast. And you could see the Washington fan base and so on just kind of saying, that's it for the season and stuff. These games could get out of hand. I think Dallas has the opportunity, if the first few minutes goes right, of blowing this team out.
Atlanta, New Orleans. I'm hearing a lot of sharp money on the Falcons here. Again, New Orleans world beaters in Tampa last week, back home this week against an Atlanta team. Any interest in that game?
Yes, as I smile. My partner in crime on the podcast, Las Vegas, Chris, and we have a disagreement on this particular game, but I can't ignore situational factors. I can't ignore history. I can't ignore the fact that neither of these coaches would be my coach if I was the GM. I took an early position on Atlanta +4. I would not be surprised if they played this game 10 times and 8 out of 10, this game landed on 3 one way or another. And if you know that not that I know, but if you think that 8 out of 10 times the game lands on 3 and you have 4 points, that's a pretty good play. So I don't think Atlanta's very good. I don't think New Orleans in spots is very good. I looked at New Orleans defense. They're typically very good under Dennis Allen defense. But if you look at Atlanta's defense, if you look at some of the metrics in Atlanta's defense, it's quite surprising what you find with Atlanta. It's pretty good. This is their best pass defense in terms of allowing percentages that they've had in 5, 6, 7 years or more. This is the best they've done at sacking opposing quarterbacks in my lifetime, almost, the way they're going, since they actually went to the Super Bowl. This isn't a bad team. They're stopping the run just as good or maybe a tad better than the Saints. I think we're sleeping on the fact that these teams are so evenly matched.
Game that really piques my interest, Chicago at Green Bay. This one opened up Green Bay 1.5, now 3. Green Bay, hats off. Jordan Love, statement game. This is my team. Aaron, who walked into Minnesota, and a coach, whatever he was thinking on the quarterback situation, should have went in there with a quick leash. You could see right away overmatched, and should have pulled the plug there. But thank God for Jaden Reed. Christian Watson nowhere to be found. Big win. Yet in comes the Chicago Bears. Since that trade for Montez Sweat, their defense has been playing fabulous. Justin Fields has been playing great. I love the Bears at 3.5. I think they could going in with house money. Thoughts on that game? And the real big question, Ron, Chicago Bears holding the number 1 pick. Are they just, we'll be talking throughout February and we'll be doing some shows in March leading up. But going into, are they keeping the 1 spot and going to draft Caleb, trade Justin to Atlanta or wherever, and then have 4 to 5 years with Caleb and build around him? Or are you going to say, you know what, we like what we're seeing with Justin. We'll trade down a couple spots. We'll get Marvin Harrison and obviously move on from there.
Yeah, I think Justin Fields made the decision tougher the last 5 weeks. I think the whole Bear organization made this tougher because, they lead the league in defensive interceptions. You said it perfectly. The last 4 or 5 weeks, ever since they got Josh Sweat in the lineup, this is a team that was dead last in defensive sacks, and now they've averaged 3 or 4 per game in the last 3 or 4 games. So that defense is coming along. When Fields is healthy, this is a pretty good team. What I would do with this team, and this is probably different than what I would have done 6-7 weeks ago, I would keep the coaching staff. If they lose this game to Green Bay, I would, then that means Aaron Rodgers still owns them. So I would hope they find a way, for their sake to get over that hump. But I would probably trade the number 1 pick, just like what you said, keep Justin Fields, keep the coaching staff. But I would make my number 1 or 1A priority backup quarterback, because we've seen 60 plus starters in the NFL. And 25 of them shouldn't be in the NFL at quarterback due to injuries or whatever. I don't know that Justin Fields is built to go through 17 games. If you want to seriously contend for the playoffs in a division that it's possible, you must address the backup quarterback position, whether you go after Ryan Tannehill as a backup or somebody else as a backup. Make sure you have somebody there, because if Justin Fields goes down, you're in the same old spot again.
Listen, whether it's Caleb, whether it's Justin Fields, I mean, the Fields to Moore combination has been fabulous when both are healthy. We know, listen, I've talked now until I'm blue in the face. Jalen Hurts and Philly didn't become that team last year and the year before without the growth of the offensive line, without the addition of A.J. Brown. And I talked to you in August and everyone that wanted to listen and said, hey, listen, they added DJ Moore. I'm not calling DJ Moore A.J. Brown, but it's a step in the right direction. So if they kept Fields and moved down, I know the sexy play is Harrison, but if you're really, really looking long-term and Justin is your guy, and it is a pretty deep wide receiver core. I know there's 2 or 3 from LSU. We talked about the Washington wide receivers. Wouldn't the corporate play is to wiggle down far enough and to get alter that left or right tackle?
Yeah, what's interesting is think back just to last year. They not only traded the number 1 pick, but that number 1 pick also came with DJ Moore. So if you're being creative, and this is the one area Chicago has not drafted well in, they've drafted 6 offensive linemen in the last 2 years, but only one of them can play. So they, in my estimation, based on my ratings, they picked the wrong offensive lineman. So why not mitigate factors? When you trade down, get one of the starting offensive linemen in return, just like you got DJ Moore. Get a veteran in there so that you could jumpstart the offensive line process. Then you get your veteran offensive lineman. It could be a guard. They're not going to part with a tackle, but guards are important. You get a starting left guard or right guard. You get Marvin Harrison, and then you draft another offensive lineman. You have a couple of picks in the second round already because of Carolina's gift to you.
And I agree. And listen, I've seen enough from Justin. He shows flashes, but you know what? It's like watching. I brought this up, and it's kind of comical. Go back a handful of years ago, Ron, when you were watching Mac Jones at Alabama. I mean, pretty easy when you're throwing to Jerry Jeudy and a bunch of other, Sunday NFL wide receivers. And then he comes to New England and he's like, okay, guys, who do I throw to? You know, and that's the same people looking at Penix. He has 3 Sunday wide receivers. And the fact is, if you think it's a plug and play, and then Penix came to, let's just say, New England, he'd be the same thing as Mac was 2 or 3 years ago. Like, all right, I'm here. I don't see, and I can't pronounce the Obadanube or whatever him. I can pronounce Polk. And so it's the same scenario. So at least now they finally realized Justin needed a receiver. They got DJ Moore. Now let's build on the offensive line and let's get that second tier wide receiver as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree completely there. And that's what the dilemma of these rookie quarterbacks. It's always going to be, do you have that target of tight end? Because tight ends are bigger than wide receivers. So you have more of a chance that they can make a play on the ball because you're not going to be throwing perfectly, seeing NFL defenses as you did, for example, at Alabama, which also places every offensive lineman into the NFL until this year. So, yeah, where you go as an NFL rookie quarterback really matters.
Just looking right down the board, I'm just going to skip the nonsense. Seattle, Arizona, I just as bad as the Seattle defense is. Unfortunately, that team, I kind of thought the resurgence of Geno last year, you would see the regression this year. And Arizona, given the vote of confidence to Kyler Murray, he's our quarterback. So I think Arizona's sneaky there. I think the Pats find a way to win. Jacksonville, Tennessee, Trevor Lawrence, didn't play last week, says he's probably going to be a go. Word on the street, trouble in paradise with Mike Vrabel. I've said all along, that would be my next head coach in New England. I love Mike. I love him as a coach. He was a former player. He's won Super Bowls. Thoughts on Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Mike Vrabel. Will he get the envelope on Monday?
Mike Vrabel does a lot of good things, but he's underperformed overall as a head coach this year. He knows the rules better than anybody, so he really exploits down and distance and penalties and all kinds of other things. There's a lot of things he does well. Plus, his teams generally stop the run cold, force you to be one-dimensional. But offensively, handing it off to Derrick Henry time after time after time only works if you're ahead in the fourth quarter, because then Henry wears your defense down. That's what kind of back Henry is. But, what's the point if you don't have a lot of offensive weapons? You have Burks that's constantly getting hurt. Your offensive line isn't that good, and they came into the year injured. I think they need to hire a much better offensive coordinator. I worry that if he goes to New England as the next head coach, that they too will kind of not move into the 21st century offensively unless they get a really good offensive coordinator, or maybe they get another GM and they get better players to hire for them. So I think Tennessee will be trying in this game, and Trevor Lawrence, for him to sit last week was finally an admission that he wasn't well. He should have been sitting 1 or 2 weeks earlier, especially after that hard hit about 6 weeks ago, to get well. So he's been playing at less than 100% for a long time. That gives Tennessee hope in this game, but it's same thing I said about Washington. What's going to happen to Tennessee in the first quarter? Because if they don't come to play in the first quarter, I don't think they're going to come to play in the third and fourth quarter.
Before we get to the big game, I have to ask you a crazy question. The head coach for Washington Huskies, his record is like 111-10. I mean, the guy is just, wherever he's gone, he's a winner. Is there any chance, and I haven't even heard this, this is as crazy as I'm going to ever sound, so I apologize. Someone in the NFL that drafts Penix that needs a head coach, do you think his name will be brought around in the 7, 8, 9 openings in the NFL?
I hadn't heard that, hadn't even thought of that. I think we're a year away from seeing whether that happens. I think part of the problem is he's been 1 or 2 years at Fresno, had tremendous success, came up and revitalized Washington. I think his offenses and the way he goes about business has been one step ahead of what colleges are doing. And maybe going to the Big Ten, he'll still be one step ahead of the Iowas and the Wisconsins and the Nebraskas and teams like that who aren't used to that kind of offense. Washington and Oregon will have that kind of advantage going for them. So I think we're about a year away from hearing that kind of talk.
Okay. And last, the game of the games, Buffalo travels to Miami. I've talked earlier in this show about, in comes Miami off of the win against Dallas, goes to Baltimore. Baltimore, fresh off the win against the Niners. No Mozart, no Jaden Waddle. Not many people are talking about this. Tua marches right down the field. They get a 7-0 lead. Baltimore comes down and matches them 7-7. Tyreek drops a layup, something you'll never see, that would have put them up 14-7, settled for the field goal. After that, it was a wrap. Lamar just wins the MVP, 5 touchdowns. Now in comes Buffalo, who a few weeks ago was out of the playoffs. They'll know exactly whether they have to win and are in, or if two teams happen to lose, they could win and be the number 2 seed. Thoughts on all of that, Ron?
What I like about Buffalo is that they're starting to get a little bit healthier in the secondary. They're still not playing great defensive ball, but they're getting a little healthier there. But the most important thing they've done is they balance the offense more. They're not forcing Josh Allen into mistakes. He had at one point was definitely leading the league in interceptions and fumbles and turnovers. But in the last 3 weeks, I don't think he's thrown. I mean, I'm going to look it up. He's thrown 15 passes, 21 passes, and 30 passes in the last 3 weeks. And when you can do that on Buffalo, you're actually scoring just as many or even more points without having him to force things. So that's really good on his end. I'm going to read you some names. You tell me what they have in common. Berrios, the wide receiver from Miami. Chris Claypool, the wide receiver from Miami. Robbie Chosen, the wide receiver from Miami. Cedric Wilson, the wide receiver from Miami. Those are 4 names.
They probably have as many touchdowns as Stephon Diggs in the last month.
One of those 4, when Waddle is out of the game, has to become the number 2 wide receiver. And I'm telling you, that's as big a drop as I can see in the NFL. I think Miami is undervalued in this game a little bit, but the odds of me forcing a play on Miami without Jalen Waddle as the number 2 receiver and having everybody go to restrict Tyreek Hill, and they will restrict Tyreek Hill. I think I read that he's had some not as many great games against Buffalo, but if he doesn't have Waddle, if I'm Buffalo, I don't care if I'm single covering Berrios or any of those other receivers. They're not harmful to me at all.
Before we wrap this up, I'm going to transition. If I told you Josh Allen has 15 rushing touchdowns, I thought that's what I heard. And Patrick Mahomes this year has 0. They're resting everyone. It's been a dismal season and I say dismal tongue in cheek. It's not the same Chiefs team that we have known and loved for defending Super Bowl champs. I've said this all along. They go as far as Travis Kelce goes. Now, whether it's the distraction with Taylor Swift, obviously there's some injuries. And then the wide receiving core, Rashee Rice has slowly finally emerged as the one, but there is no 2. I mean, MVS, you name it, whoever you want. No one has emerged there. We will talk next Friday on the seedings and the actual first round of the playoffs. But thoughts with Week 18, Kansas City taking it off, getting ready for the playoffs, where they are and early expectations before we know their matchup next week.
So I'm glad you brought this up because this had completely been out of my mind and I hadn't really brought this up all week. So I get to bring it up for you. What happened to Kansas City, locked into the number 3 seed, was the absolute best thing that's ever happened to this team. It's just unbelievable what a run of good fortune they have that they're not playing for anything this week. Each of the last 6 weeks, they've had a rest differential disadvantage. Most of the time, they played against pretty good teams in that stretch. Last week was Cincinnati, who could have covered, but they didn't cover at the end. But Cincinnati's not a complete team. And I've taken advantage of it. It's a terrible NFL schedule that was handed to Kansas City. And if they had to play for something this week on equal rest, but still, if they had to play for something, they never would have had a chance to recharge, and they were done in the playoffs. This is a bye week for them. This is an incredible opportunity for this team to reset and recharge. I think it elevates Kansas City's chances in the playoffs tremendously. The offensive line is still top notch. Rashee Rice is a very capable wide receiver. I think Kelsey's been slightly banged up. Pacheco, we know, has been banged up. Mahomes could get in rhythm. He's not going to use this to sit down and watch TV. He's going to force his wide receivers to get on the same page with him, and he has 2 weeks to do it. The defense gets to rest up. I think Kansas City's prospects for the playoffs have been elevated tremendously by this bye week.
Well, we can't wait, obviously, to talk next Friday on the matchups for the first round. We'll get your thoughts, AFC, NFC potential champs, and obviously Super Bowl. But as we always end the show, I'd like to give you that nice little tight 7-yard button hook. And Ron, your closing thoughts for the week.
Okay, I guess I'm going to share some general thoughts now that we've gone through a bowl season with 500, I'd say over 500 starters missing games. Florida State, we know, had over 20 starters miss the game. Notre Dame, Oregon State, in one matchup, they had 30 starters miss the game. So we had a lot. So it's all been different. For those people who start assessing the new coaching changes, maybe we'll talk about this in the off season and stuff, assigning power ratings, getting ready for next season and so on. I think you're going to see the biggest gap ever between the top 5, I guess top 4 conferences now, and the MAC and the Mountain West and the American Conference and so on, because these players have already been bought. We saw people leave Georgia State, their leading receiver and their leading running back, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver, before their bowl game. Who would have ever thought that a Georgia State receiver would not play in a bowl game? Leave just because they wanted to go to the transfer portal and because they were offered a ton of cash to go before the bowl game started. I think the talent level across the board, after you get past a Wake Forest or anybody in the Power 4 conferences to the Bowling Greens and to the Georgia States, is going to be as wide as you've ever seen it before. So when you see those week 1 matchups, for example, and you say, oh, Bowling Green can spring an upset against Iowa or somebody like that, their talent level is going to be lower. That's just a particular thought I have there. One more thought on next year, 12-team playoff next year. In some ways, I really didn't want to embrace it because it really should have been capped at 8. And we would have had a great 8 this year. We would have had Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia joining the 4. Those 8 would have been spectacular. But now we're going to have 12. At least we're going to have 6 real games with very few opt-outs. So I like that part. But get ready to, I think the over-under on number of Big Ten and SEC teams that make the 12-team playoff is going to be 7.5. I think you're going to see really a minimum of 4 in one and 3 in the other making the playoffs. That's my crystal ball right now. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's my crystal ball. 7 or 8 out of 12 teams from 2 conferences.
Well, I know one team that is doing cartwheels about the 12, and that's Penn State. They've had some decent teams the last 2 years, just haven't been able to beat a Michigan or an Ohio State. So you would think going into next year, he would feel a lot better saying, hey, we got a good shot to finally get into this. And then, as you said, in the SEC, it's been dominated by Alabama and it's been dominated, obviously, by Georgia. You sprinkle in an LSU here and there, but there was some good teams, the LSUs, the Ole Misses. There was some good teams. Now you're going to add the Texases of the world, the Oklahomas. So it's going to be, without a doubt, an amazing, amazing year. And I'm interested. I don't know this answer. I don't know if you do. You're talking 12. Have you heard anything about a bye where maybe 1 and 2 get a bye and then the rest play, and then or are they reseeding? Have you heard any how the breakdown's going?
I think the breakdown is the top 4 take off the first week. And
Okay.
so it's 5 through 8. I want to say 5 through 12. In my world, 5, 6, 7, 8 should host those games. Because I thought even in an 8-team playoff, 1, 2, 3, 4 should host as a reward for it. But I think they're hosting, or at least they get to call their shots on that. And then, so 4 of the teams drop off, then there's 8. And I don't know for a fact, but I would think the lowest seeded remaining team would then play the number 1 seed and so on.
So that would make sense for a reseed that obviously we don't do in the college basketball. And I guess the last question about that would be, the bowl games have lost all the luster with the opt-outs, with the transfer portal, with the coaches being fired, coaches moving on to other jobs. They're actually meaningless. But there was something on social media stating just the viewership, the 2 and 3 million views, other than football and maybe the NBA, there's nothing more that is getting viewed. So the assumption would be that though these bowl sponsors would be slapping on, their bowl games into this format, correct?
Well, the bowls aren't going away, because if ESPN didn't run bowl games, what would they run? So they're going to get ratings anyway. Meaningless bowl games, they're not all meaningless, because if a team has not been to a bowl game for 4 or 5 years, and then they're 6 and 6 or 7 and 5 or whatever, and they get to a bowl game, it means something to at least to the kids that do not have NFL what's the right word? Aspirations.
Then,
yeah, if they don't have that, then let's get that bowl game. Let's say that we did something, maybe, they can have that bowl victory and so on. But there's no other programming. Bad bowl games in college football still get more views than a hockey game, an NHL hockey game, or a regular college basketball game, or something like that. So, like it or not, they're not going away.
Well, I can't thank you enough. Had you working overtime this week. Super stoked. We'll be around for the next couple Fridays at least, and we're going to get everyone closer to the Super Bowl. Happy New Year. Glad you had a great New Year. Glad you enjoyed the holidays. Everyone, if you're not following them on Twitter, or X as we call it nowadays, go to Ron at Ace Sports. Ron, tell them where they can find all your other work throughout the week.
Okay. Well, I have articles up at Wager Talk right now that are much more comprehensive than we had a chance to get in here. They have a lot of information on the playoff scenarios, the player incentives, who I think will be trying or not trying. Even gave away, some of the tips that I have as far as first quarter, second quarter, and so on. Whether I'm right or wrong, I think there's a lot of information in those Wager Talk articles. And I believe the NCAA football article should be out as far as the title game, fascinating title game soon. And then Chris and I will be back on Tuesday, and we'll have the gang together with Ted on Friday, and be back with you on Friday as well. So I'm not disappearing quite yet, even though I'm just a football guy. So fascinated to see what's going on in Week 18. It's going to be a great week. I'll be watching.
From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Ron Marmalefsky at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed night and weekend. Have some fun, cash a few tickets, enjoy Week 18, enjoy the championship game, and myself and Ron will be back here on Friday, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. Enjoy, gentlemen. Everyone and ladies, thank you so much. Wager Talk, have a great weekend as well. And we will see you soon.